My name is Mark, I'm 35, and for 15 years, I believed I had a perfectly ordinary, predictable life. I thought I knew my wife, Sarah, my friends, my future. It was a comforting, fundamental lie, one I built my entire world upon. Then, at a seemingly routine family dinner in our quiet dining room, Sarah's phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the polished wood floor. As she bent to retrieve it, a notification flashed on the screen, a split-second glimpse that changed everything. How do you unlearn 15 years of your life in a single breath? I saw a message from a stranger, a bank statement revealing massive, unexplained transfers, and a photo of my best friend in a place he shouldn't be, with a look that chilled me to the bone. It all unraveled in less than an hour. She was still smiling, oblivious, as she reached for the dropped phone, her eyes bright with the innocent lie she'd perfected for so long, unaware her carefully constructed world was about to shatter. Before I tell you what happened when they saw me, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below. The stale morning air hung thick and heavy in the kitchen, smelling faintly of yesterday's burnt toast and the bitter grounds in the French press. Ben hadn't bothered cleaning. He nursed his third cup of black coffee, the cheap ceramic mug warm against his palms, staring blankly at the swirling dark liquid. Outside, the gray suburban morning was unfolding with indifferent normalcy. A lawnmower starting up down the street. The distant rhythm of traffic inside the silence stretched taut as a trip wire. A dry, rasping sound escaped his throat. It might have been a laugh, or maybe just the sound of something inside him cracking. He shook his head slowly, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes, usually mild, held a new, hard glint. Are you kidding me, Kathy? That you flew into a rage just now threatened me? Her eyes scanned his face, searching for weakness. Who do you think they'll believe, Ben? Me? Respected attorney, junior league member, or you? The quiet accountant nobody really knows. The guy with, well, let's just say a past people might find interesting if they dug a little. She leaned back, crossing her arms. The victor surveying the spoils. Oh, and one more thing, she added, her tone dripping with condescending sweetness. Alex wants to meet you properly. He's coming over tomorrow night around 7 o'clock. Ben stared, dumbfounded. Don't be late. As she walked away, leaving him alone in the suffocating silence. Ben slowly picked up his coffee mug. He didn't drink. He just stared into the blackness, his reflection distorted on the surface. A rough chuckle escaped Ben's lips, low and guttural. It wasn't amusement, it was contempt. He slowly turned his head, letting his gaze travel deliberately up and down Alex's unimpressive frame. The chuckle grew into a dry, humorless laugh. This Ben gestured vaguely towards Alex with his glass, the ice cubes clinking. So, the plan is you two shack up, take everything I own, leave me with nothing that about the size of it. Alex, emboldened by Kathy's defense, straightened up, adopting a sneering tone. That's exactly right, Ben. We've discussed it. You're getting nothing, not a zip. Sorry to burst your bubble, little man. He took another slow sip of his whiskey. I resigned this morning, effective immediately. You what? Kathy gasped, her face paling. Alex looked utterly lost, the foundation of their smug plan crumbling beneath him. Resigned? It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator finally given permission to hunt. Alex, Ben said, his voice deceptively calm as he set his whiskey glass down with deliberate care on the table. I warned you. He stood up, unfolding from the chair, not with anger, but with a fluid, dangerous grace Alex hadn't anticipated. Get out of my house now. Crack. A rib gave way under a vicious body blow. Alex wheezed, struggling feebly. Real men don't sneak into another man's home like a ducking rat. Thump. Ben watched, his breathing slowly returning to normal. He gave Linda a curt nod. Everything was proceeding according to plan. He walked over to where Alex lay moaning. Reaching down, Ben grabbed him by the collar and dragged him, limp and unresisting, towards the front door. From the trunk of his own beat-up pickup parked in the driveway, he retrieved a tire iron. The heavy steel felt solid, comforting in his hand. Crash! The BMW's windshield imploded inwards in a shower of safety glass. Smash! Break-in self-defense. The man became aggressive, attacked him. He defended himself. He didn't mention Kathy's affair, Alex's threats, or the calculated nature of the preceding events. He certainly didn't mention Linda. It ain't just Ben you got to worry about. You're putting yourself on the radar of guys who consider breaking bones a friendly warning. Guys who know how to make problems disappear permanently. Alex's bluster evaporated like mist in the sun. His eyes widened, the color draining from his already bruised face. Wise choice. My advice, get out of town, far away, and forget you ever met Ben or his wife. He stood up. Nurse will be in with some discharge papers when you're ready. Meanwhile, Kathy, physically less damaged, but emotionally shattered, was being interviewed in another room. Every single day, two large, silent men in worn leather cuts bearing the snarling devil's disciples patch would appear during visiting hours. They wouldn't speak. They wouldn't threaten. They just sit in the chairs by his bed, staring at him with dead, unblinking eyes for the entire hour. The nurses couldn't make them leave. As the plane climbed, leaving the town and its suffocating network of unseen connections behind, Alex didn't feel relief. He felt like prey that had momentarily escaped the snare, knowing the hunters were still out there, and their reach was terrifyingly long. Weeks later, Indian summer, the heat clung stubbornly to the asphalt, even as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised shades of orange and purple. Ben was driving his pickup, windows down, the rumble of the engine, a satisfying counterpoint to the crappy classic rock station crackling on the radio. He was heading out of town. Alex wrestled it back onto the pavement, his face pale with terror. Ben pulled alongside them, matching their speed. He looked over. Kathy was staring at him, her face a mask of pure fear. Alex refused to look, his eyes fixed rigidly on the road ahead, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Kathy slid into the chair opposite him, not gently. The wooden legs scraped against the linoleum, a sound that set Ben's teeth on edge. She didn't meet his eyes immediately, instead fussing with the collar of her silk robe, a ridiculously expensive thing he knew she'd bought last week. When she finally looked up, her expression wasn't guilt, wasn't remorse. It was clinical and like a doctor about to deliver a diagnosis she expected him to simply accept. The words were low, rough. You sit there, tell me you're screwing your boss, and then offer me, what? Scheduled pity meetings like I'm some kind of pet you need to remember to feed. He pushed his chair back, the legs screeching this time, a raw, ugly sound that matched the feeling tearing through his gut. Get yourself a lawyer, Kathy. The implication hung there, heavy and suffocating. His past wasn't squeaky clean knots, he thought, long buried. She tilted her head. The picture of calculating malice. You'll lose everything. You want him here. You heard me, she snapped, the sweetness vanishing. He thinks it's important we all clear the air, establish the new dynamic. She gave him that twisted, mocking smile again. I expect you to be welcoming, Ben. Offer him a drink. The dread was still there, but something else was crystallizing beneath it. A cold, hard resolve. She thought she held all the cards. She thought she'd broken him. She had no idea. This is him. This is the alpha male, Kathy. He took another sip, savoring the burn, savoring the rising flush on Alex's face. Jesus, guy doesn't even need a costume for St. Paddy's Day. Kathy deserves better, and I'm going to make sure she gets it. We'll take the house, the savings, garnish your wages. You'll be paying for this mistake for the rest of your miserable life. He took a step closer, trying to loom, which was physically impossible. And yeah, he added, a nasty smirk spreading across his face. You can't just I can. Ben interrupted smoothly. And I did. So, let's recap. No house for you to take, no job, no income for you to bleed dry. Seems like your grand scheme just went tits up, doesn't it? Alex, buoyed by his perceived victory, laughed. A harsh grating sound. Make me. He sneered, taking another step forward, completely misreading the situation. Guys like you all talk. A straight right sent Alex stumbling back against the wall. And they sure as hell don't lay hands on someone unless they are prepared for the consequences. Alex slid down the wall, gasping, trying to shield his face. Ben stepped back, breathing heavily. Not from exertion, but from controlled rage. Alex's expensive shoes scraped uselessly against the floor. Where? Where are you taking me? Alex stammered through bloodied lips. Showtime, Ben replied grimly. A headlight disintegrated. Crunch. He brought the iron down hard on the hood, leaving a deep, ugly dent. He worked his way around the car, methodically, dispassionately destroying it. Windows, mirrors, tail lights. Later at the hospital, the scene played out with calculated precision. Alex, groggy with painkillers, but still clinging to a shred of indignant fury, tried to press charges. I want him arrested, he rasped to a different officer, a burly sergeant named Kowalski with eyes that had seen too much. That maniac. He attacked me. The devil's disciples. He'd heard the name whispered around town. Extortion, drug running, unsolved disappearances. He suddenly remembered the coldness in Ben's eyes, the controlled brutality of the beating. It hadn't been random rage. She tried to spin her narrative, the abusive husband, the unprovoked attack on her friend. But her story crumbled under the policewoman's skeptical questioning, especially when contrasted with Alex's sudden declaration of falling down the stairs. When Alex was wheeled past her room later, his face pale with terror, he caught her eye. Leave it, Kathy, he whispered urgently, his voice. Just leave it. They weren't technically doing anything wrong, but the message was crystal clear. We see you. We know where you are. You exist at our sufferance. When Alex was finally discharged, bruised and jumpy, the escort began. Maybe grab a beer at a roadside joint Linda had told him about miles away from the sterile silence of his house. And then he saw it. Up ahead, puttering along, well below the speed limit, was a ridiculously small beat-up hatchback. A Geo Metro maybe painted a faded depressing beige. Crammed inside looking uncomfortable and distinctly out of place were two figures. Ben grinned, a flash of teeth. Then he swerved his truck slightly towards them, forcing the hatchback onto the gravel shoulder. Dust billowed up as the small car skidded to a halt, engine stalling with a pathetic cough. Ben pulled his truck up a few yards ahead, angled to block them in. He killed the engine. Ben, she began, her voice unnervingly level, devoid of the tremor he might have anticipated. There's something you need to know. I've been seeing someone. She paused, letting the words hang there. Simple, brutal. Find the most expensive, blood-sucking shark you can find. Because this is over. Kathy's composure finally cracked. Surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by a hardening of her features. She hadn't expected this. Your reputation gone. Any chance of a decent job gone. Friends will evaporate. You think you can start over? I will make sure you have nothing. Be polite. Maybe you two can talk about golf or whatever it is men like you talk about. The implication was clear. Men like you, the betas, the losers. Be a good boy for me. This wasn't a marriage ending. It was a war beginning, and he wasn't planning on losing. The next evening, the air in the living room was thick with anticipation. Stale cigarette smoke. Ben had taken up the habit again just that afternoon, a defiant foe to the life Kathy envisioned and the heavy scent of cheap whiskey. Just slap a green hat on him. Kathy's forced smile tightened, her eyes flashing with irritation. Ben, watch your mouth. She hissed, her voice a low warning. Alex is confident, assertive. Tonight, after you crawl away somewhere, I'm taking her upstairs to your bed. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Ben just stared at him, a strange stillness settling over him. The house? He asked, his voice dangerously soft. He looked from Kathy's furious face to Alex's stunned one. He felt a surge of cold, hard satisfaction, the first genuine positive emotion in days. So, Alex, he said, his voice dropping again, the amusement gone, replaced by something colder, harder. Why don't you tell me again what exactly is it you think you're taking from me? Because from where I'm sitting, looks like you walked in here with nothing, and you're leaving with even less. You wouldn't dare. I'll have you rotting in jail if you even touch me. Ben's smile widened, turning feral. The slap hadn't just hurt. It had flipped a switch. He surveyed the crumpled figure. You're nothing, Alex, Ben said, his voice chillingly calm. Now, just a pathetic little bully who picked the wrong ducking house. Kathy, frozen in disbelief until that moment, let out a choked scream. Ben, stop it. You'll kill him. She lunged towards Ben, arms flailing, trying to pull him away. He hauled Alex out onto the front lawn, the neighbor's porch lights casting long, eerie shadows. Propping the dazed man against the trunk of the oak tree near the curb, Ben pulled out his phone. The screen flared to life. He hit record. Say hello, Alex, Ben said, shoving the phone close to Alex's bruised face. Each impact echoed in the quiet suburban street. Finally, breathing slightly harder now, Ben tossed the tire iron onto the lawn. He stopped filming, pocketed his phone, and looked down at the cake-covered, bleeding mess that was Alex still slumped against the tree. Then he looked back towards his house, where Linda presumably still had Kathy under control. The distant wail of sirens grew louder. Someone must have called the cops. Look what he did. Kowalski listened patiently, flipping through his notepad with slow, deliberate movements. When Alex finished, the sergeant leaned in conspirator ally, lowering his voice. You sure you want to go down that road, Mr. Sorry, what was the name again? He glanced at his notes. It had been practiced. Kowalski continued, his voice a low murmur. This beating you took. Trust me, son. It could have been a hell of a lot worse. Drop the divorce. Drop everything. Get out. He's not who you think. We messed with the wrong guy badly. He relayed the cop's warning. 70 Harleys didn't literally follow his car home, but their presence saturated the town. 2 bikes would be parked across the street from his condo. A few more would be idling outside the grocery store. They'd rumble past his office window at random intervals. They were never overtly threatening, but they were always there. Even from a distance, Ben recognized them. Kathy, staring straight ahead, her face tight with frustration, and squeezed into the driver's seat, looking even smaller and more pathetic than Ben remembered, was Alex. A slow, cold smile spread across Ben's face. They hadn't left town after all. Or maybe they'd come back, stupidly thinking enough time had passed. The sudden silence amplifying the frantic chirping of crickets in the tall grass. He reached down beside his seat, grabbed the half-empty can of cheap lager he'd been nursing, and swung himself out of the cab. He walked back towards the stranded hatchback, the gravel crunching under his boots. Kathy and Alex just sat there, frozen, watching him approach like deer caught in headlights. Ben stopped beside the driver's side window. It's Alex, my boss. Ben didn't react immediately. He just watched her, trying to reconcile the woman across the table. The wife he'd shared a bed with for 3 years, built tentative plans with, argued over thermostat settings with this cold stranger delivering a wrecking ball to their life. He felt a strange detachment, like watching a scene unfold on a screen. She'd expected tears, maybe yelling, but ultimately capitulation. She'd always seen him as pliable, predictable, safe. "Don't you dare walk away from me, Ben," she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. She leaned forward again, her eyes narrowing, the clinical mask replaced by something sharp and predatory. "Sit down." He stopped halfway out of his chair, looking back at her. "Not a dime. Not a shred of dignity. You'll be radioactive." She let the silence stretch, watching him absorb the poison. "So, here's the deal. Make a good impression." "Kathy," Ben said, his voice dangerously quiet now. A low rumble beneath the surface. "Calm." Ben sat slumped in his armchair, the tumbler of Jack Daniels leaving a wet ring on the worn mahogany side table. He wasn't steeling himself. He was simmering, waiting. He'd spent the day making calls, quiet conversations with voices from a past he kept locked away. Preparations had been made, contingencies. "Everything you're not." "Oh, I'm sure he is." Ben drawled, leaning back further into his chair, radiating a dangerous calm. "If this little fella is your gold standard for alpha calf, maybe I've been giving you way too much credit all these years." He shifted his gaze to Alex, who was glancing uncertainly at Kathy, clearly unprepared for mockery instead of intimidation or despair. A slow, almost pitying smile touched his lips. "You think you're taking this house?" He chuckled again, a low rumbling sound. "Alex, you poor schmuck. This house isn't mine." Alex, cornered and humiliated, reverted to playground tactics, his face twisting into a mask of impotent rage. "You think you're so smart, huh? Think you're in charge?" He puffed himself up again, taking another aggressive step forward, practically nose to knee with Ben, who remained seated. "I'm the alpha here." The weeks of simmering resentment, the calculated humiliation, the sheer audacity of this pathetic little man standing in his home threatening him, striking him. It all coalesced into a single point of cold, white-hot fury. "Jail!" Ben echoed softly. Then his fist exploded outwards. It wasn't a wild swing. Ben barely registered her. But before Kathy's hands could even reach him, a figure moved with startling speed from the shadowed archway leading to the hall. A woman Ben hadn't seen enter, but whose presence he'd clearly anticipated. Tall, lean, with short-cropped dark hair and the unmistakable coiled intensity of someone trained for violence. "Linda. Tell everyone what happens when you mess with things that aren't yours." Alex just groaned, turning his head away. Ben grabbed his chin, forcing him to look at the camera. "Smile for the camera, a-hole." Then, dropping Alex back against the tree, Ben walked purposefully towards the curb where Alex's car, a slightly sad-looking BMW 3 Series, trying too hard like its owner, was parked. In the back seat, Ben spotted it. Good. That was part of the plan, too. Ben walked back towards his front door, stepping over shards of glass. He felt strangely calm, cleansed. This wasn't just revenge. Yes, Alex. Of course, I'm sure. Kowalski sighed, a world-weary sound. "Look, let me give you some friendly, off-the-road advice. You know who Ben is. I mean, really, no." Alex looked confused. "He's just some accountant. You pushed this. You involved the law against one of them. You think a restraining order is going to stop a dozen angry bikers from paying you a late-night visit? Think carefully. Is this chick?" The biker connection, the sheer visceral fear in his voice finally penetrating Kathy's bubble of entitlement and rage. She stared at him, then back at the impassive face of the policewoman. The threats she'd made just yesterday morning seemed pathetic now, childishly naive compared to the abyss Alex's words hinted at. Biker gangs, devil's disciples. Was Ben really connected to that? A constant low-level hum of menace that frayed Alex's nerves raw. He considered going back to the police, but the final nail in that coffin came a week later. Driving downtown, heart pounding as a pair of bikers shadowed him 3 car lengths back, he saw Police Chief Martin standing outside the courthouse chatting with the mayor. Martin was wearing his uniform, but over it, casually unzipped, was a black leather vest. On the back, unmistakable even from a distance, was the Devil's Disciples MC patch. Or maybe they were just passing through, trying to get somewhere else. It didn't matter. They were here. In his path, he eased his foot down on the accelerator. The big truck surged forward, its engine roaring. He didn't say anything. He just looked at Alex, then at Kathy, his expression unreadable. He raised the beer can. For a moment, Alex flinched, thinking Ben was going to throw it at him. Instead, Ben casually tossed the can underhanded onto the roof of the tiny car where it landed with a hollow clunk. She continued, mistaking his silence for what? Acquiescence? Shock. Look, I know this is abrupt, but it's happening, and I need you to understand this doesn't have to change everything between us. She leaned forward slightly, the silk robe gaping just enough to reveal the curve of her collarbone. The air crackled. You think this is your decision to make? A cold, smug smile touched her lips, chilling him more than any anger could have. You think you can just call a lawyer, serve me papers, and waltz off into the sunset? Oh, Benny boy, you really don't know who you married, do you? He stared at her, silent, waiting. You stay. You play the part. You keep your mouth shut about Alex, about everything, or I burn your entire world down to the goddamn foundations. Your choice. Ben sank slowly back into his chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a cold, simmering dread. Are you sure this is the road you want to go down? Threatening me? Bringing him here? Because I can, Ben. She replied, her voice hard as nails. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the house, followed by Kathy's voice, artificially bright, laced with a brittle cheerfulness that grated on Ben's nerves. Alex, darling, come on in. Make yourself at home. Ben took a long, slow pull from his glass, the burn tracing a familiar path down his throat. He didn't turn as they entered the living room. Tell me, Alex, Ben continued, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. How does it feel coming into my house? Planning on drilling my wife in my bed? Does it make you feel big? Alex's face reaned further, a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Never was. Belonged to my mother. She passed 2 years ago. It's in a trust, untouchable, especially by adulterous gold diggers and their pet leprechauns. You won't see a penny from it. Got it? You do what I say. And right now, I say I'm taking Kathy upstairs. He leaned in, his voice a low sneer, and there's still nothing you can do about it. Then, with a sudden impulsive burst of bravado, Alex swung his open hand. It was short, brutal, perfectly aimed. It connected with Alex's jaw with a sickening crunch. Alex staggered back, eyes wide with shock and pain. A thin trickle of LWD appearing at the corner of his mouth. Before he could even process it, Ben was on him. Linda intercepted Kathy mid-lunge, grabbing her wrists in a grip like steel clamps. Kathy cried out, startled and enraged, trying to wrench free. Let me go. Not happening, Linda stated, her voice flat, emotionless. With terrifying efficiency, she twisted Kathy's arms behind her back, forcing her down to her knees with a grunt of pain. A ridiculously ornate cake box. Alex had actually brought a freaking cake. The pathetic cherry on top of this whole disaster. Ben opened the passenger door, retrieved the cake. A multi-layered monstrosity with overly sweet frosting, and walked back to Alex. It was a statement, a declaration that he wasn't the man they thought he was. He wasn't the doormat. He was the goddamn boot. The flashing red and blue lights painted the living room in frantic strobing colors. Paramedics were working on Alex out on the lawn, carefully loading him onto a gurney. Kowalski chuckled softly, a dry, humorless sound. Accountant? Yeah, maybe now. But Ben used to run with the devil's disciples MC. Not prospects, not hangarounds. He nodded vaguely towards the hallway where Kathy had likely been taken. Worth ending up in pieces in different dumpsters across 3 counties. Alex swallowed hard, his throat clicking. He could almost feel the phantom vibrations of motorcycle engines. The image of Ben's cold smile flashed in his mind. The quiet man she'd married? The one she'd dismissed as weak and predictable? A cold dread far deeper than the fear of Ben's anger began to creep into her soul. The days that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Kathy, thoroughly spooked, quickly contacted a cut-rate lawyer Alex recommended, signing divorce papers that gave Ben everything, or rather demanded nothing from him. Alex nearly threw up in his car. It wasn't just a gang. It was the system. They weren't outsiders. They were woven into the fabric of the town. He closed the distance rapidly, the pickup looming over the tiny car like a predator sizing up its prey. He saw Kathy glance in the rearview mirror, her eyes widening in panic. Alex hunched lower over the steering wheel, trying to speed up, but the little car whined in protest. Ben tapped their rear bumper gently at first, just a nudge. The hatchback fishtailed slightly. "Get out of my road," Ben said, his voice low, flat, utterly dismissive. "Lowers." He didn't wait for a reaction. He turned his back on them, walked back to his truck, climbed in, and fired up the engine. He glanced in his rearview mirror as he pulled away. They were still sitting there, dust settling around their pathetic little car on the side of the empty highway, trapped and powerless. "I can make sure you're still taken care of, Ben. Physically, you won't be left out." The sheer unadulterated gall of it finally broke through the numbness. It wasn't even the affair itself, though that stung like hell. It was the presentation, the assumption, the utter dismissal of him as anything more than a household appliance requiring occasional maintenance. "You try to divorce me like this," she said, her voice barely audible, but carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "and I will bury you. You understand? I'll go to the police. Sergeant Miller plays golf with my father every other Thursday. I'll tell him you hit me, that you've been hitting me for months." This wasn't his wife. This was someone else entirely. Someone ruthless and calculating. Someone willing to destroy him without a second thought. Kathy watched him, her smugness returning. "Because this is my life now, and I run it. You just live in it. And if you want to salvage anything, anything at all, you'll do exactly as I tell you." She stood up abruptly, the silk robes swirling around her. 7 o'clock, Kathy's hand possessively on the man's arm, guiding him like a prize poodle. Then Ben looked, and the absurdity of it hit him like a physical blow. Alex, this was the titan of industry, the alpha, who had supposedly swept Kathy off her feet. The man was diminutive, barely 5 feet 5 inches, if that, with a soft paunch straining the buttons of an overly expensive, poorly fitting suit, thinning hair, slicked back, and a futile attempt to conceal a receding hairline. He looked less like a captain of industry, and more like a mid-level manager trying desperately to project authority he didn't possess. He puffed out his chest, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Listen here, pal." "Enough, Ben," Kathy snapped, stepping slightly in front of Alex, protective. "I told you to be respectful." "Respectful?" Ben scoffed, the sound sharp. "You bring this hobbit into my home after telling me how you're going to screw me over and you expect respect. Did you hit your head?" He focused on Alex again. Alex's smug expression faltered, confusion clouding his eyes. He shot a glance at Kathy, who looked equally blindsided. "What?" "But end the job," Ben continued, pressing his advantage, enjoying the shifting power dynamic. "The income you're planning on garnishing." Crack. The sound echoed in the tense silence of the room. Ben didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He just slowly raised a hand to his cheek where the red print was already forming. A slow chilling smile spread across his face. Another punch, this one sinking deep into Alex's soft midsection, doubling him over with a choked gasp. Ben grabbed a handful of Alex's expensive suit jacket, yanking him upright. "You think you're the real deal?" Ben snarled, his voice a low growl, each word punctuated by the impact of his fists. "Thack." Alex's nose flattened, lewd erupting. "Real men don't prey on other people's lives." Kathy struggled, but Linda used leverage and controlled force, slamming her face down onto the carpet beside the whimpering Alex. Linda didn't stop there. She delivered two sharp, punishing blows, not fists, but a precise palm strikes to Kathy's ribs and shoulder blade. Enough to incapacitate, to instill primal fear, but calculated to avoid serious injury. Kathy gasped, the fight knocked out of her. "You brought a gift?" Ben asked, his voice dripping with mock surprise. "How thoughtful." Without another word, he brought the cake up and slammed it hard into Alex's already battered face. Frosting, crumbs, and cheap sponge exploded outwards, coating Alex's hair, his bloody nose, his torn suit jacket. Ben stepped back, still filming. Then he walked deliberately to the BMW. His face obscured by bandages and remnants of cake frosting. Inside, another set checked over Kathy, who sat huddled on the sofa, trembling, refusing to meet Ben's gaze. Linda stood unobtrusively near the doorway, a silent, watchful presence. A uniformed officer, older, weary-looking, was taking Ben's statement. Ben kept it simple. "Full patch member, road captain for a while, I hear. The kind of guys who settle disagreements with more than just harsh language, if you catch my drift." He leaned closer. "You file this assault charge. You make this official." "No," he croaked, his voice trembling. "No charges. I tripped, fell down the stairs. It was an accident." Kowalski nodded slowly, closing his notebook with a decisive snap. "No alimony, no assets, not even a fight over the cheap furniture. She just wanted out." Within 5 days of the confrontation, she packed 2 suitcases, sold her car for cash, and caught a Greyhound bus heading west, disappearing from Ben's life without a backward glance. Alex's departure was less voluntary, more orchestrated. During his week-long hospital stay, mostly for observation and milking the minor concussion, he had visitors. There was no escape. No one to run to. That night, Alex packed a single bag. He didn't bother selling his condo or his wrecked BMW. He just got into a taxi before dawn, went straight to the airport, and bought a one-way ticket to the furthest place he could think of, Anchorage. Kathy screamed, audible even over the engines. Alex fought the wheel. Ben tapped it again, harder this time. Thump. The little car swerved violently towards the shoulder. Ben chuckled, a dark, satisfied sound. He cranked up the radio, the snarling guitars filling the cab, and drove off into the deepening twilight. The road ahead was clear.